For those who ask, I do not have any answers yet. I have to go for an EEG in the morning. So keep hoping they'll figure out what's going on here. Electroencephalogram, I think it is called. Yeah, nurse. Well, they couldn't find one on the MRI, so they're going to see if there's any brain waves in there. Yeah. But anyway, so tonight we're in the book of Esther, chapter 3, and we're going to talk a little bit about Mordecai tonight, and standing firm. So I want you to think about a time when you refused to do something that went against your convictions, and what happened? Did it cost you anything? I'll start it off. Years ago, I had a boss in the Army, and she told me one day, she said, you know, you've got to work Sunday. And I worked weekends sometimes. But she came up and said, you're going to work this weekend. And there were a lot of other people that could have worked. And I said, you know, I miss a lot, and I don't want to miss church, so I'd rather not work. When the Army, they don't do well to discussion. They just don't. And so she got mad and made me work the next several Sundays in a row. Sometimes we pay a price. Well, a big price, because I didn't argue. I just said, yes, ma'am, and I did it. And she relented. She was going to make me work a lot longer, and then when she realized she wasn't going to get a rise out of me, and it wasn't going to change anything, and I wasn't going to get ugly about it, she gave up. So I wore her down, as Steve, what's his name, Urkel used to say. I wore her down. So anybody else have one that they, yes, Lib?
Religion and what she believed in. And I didn't get mad. I just said, I don't agree with you. He tried to argue with me. I said, you believe what you want. I'll believe what I want.
There you go. Anybody else want to share something that because they stood up for their beliefs, they paid a price?
I didn't pay a price. Bruce and I, we dated a long time. We were in high school. And we went to a high school party. And we got there to this house. And there were no parents. And there was stuff going on that we found out even later. There was more stuff going on than we cared to know about. And I said to him, I think we need to get out of here. And he said, yes, we do. And so we left, and the police showed up not too long after that. And so, actually, I think we were rewarded. I mean, we couldn't have been there between 5 and 10 minutes. And we solved the situation. We got, we got to get out of here. And so it was good that we left, and we did.
Discretion is often the better part of valor.
Yeah.
When in doubt, run. You can get away from it. So, faith can miraculously sustain people through hard times. It can. It gives you something to lean on, something to trust in. And in light of that darkness and the hardships, it gives you that, I guess, that unshakable strength to lean back on, that knowledge. Around the world, people of faith continue to struggle with issues, political hardships. You know, I think of Haiti, and every time I talk to Luton about it, he just says, well, it's rough, but, you know, God's good to us, and the church is growing, and it's like, it's miserable. There is terrible lack of food. In fact, they're now approaching one of the largest rates of, what do they call it, starvation, or food, there's a word for it, political word for it, but food.
Malnutrition.
Yeah, but it's malnutrition, starvation. It's hard to get food. I did see a short video from a Haiti news source the other day, and it showed people just about fighting for cups of rice. You know, just one cup full of dry rice. And we saw that after the earthquake, if you remember me talking about the fact that people would fight and we'd have to sometimes retreat into a building behind gates and lock ourselves in because it would get violent. Have you ever been that hungry that you thought about being violent? Now, I know women, you scratch the dashboard is what Allison always says, but that's a little different. They are ready to get violent over it. So, we have places where people are afraid to speak their beliefs. In Canada, it is illegal for a minister to preach or read the verses that condemn homosexuality or transsexual lifestyles. And we have scriptures that if you just read it as a preacher, you can go to jail for it. Just reading those verses. Well, that's an interesting change in first world countries to see that sort of thing. So faith is what gives courage to people to hold on, to march ahead, to when everything else appears to be falling apart. I can't see my notes. And that's what's important. We need that courage. So here's the background story. So Haman has been named chief advisor for the king, Xerxes. And he is getting pretty full of himself, I guess is what I want to say. He starts telling people everyone below him must bow to him. And all the court officials they're apparently afraid of this guy. And so they're all bowing before him. But when we got to Mordecai, Esther's, I guess, foster dad, whatever you want to call her, her uncle, or cousin, Mordecai is not going to do it. He just refuses to bow. And word gets to Haman, when you walk by, he's not getting on his knees like he's supposed to. So I guess my first question would be, what is your just immediate gut reaction to why Mordecai won't bow down? We're not getting a lot of discussion. We'll get back to it.
Worship the Lord your God, and only Him shall you serve.
Mm-hmm. Worship only God. God has said that. We'll look at that verse in a few minutes. Why do you think these other court officials run tattling on him? Why do they want to, Terry?
They're trying to get him out of there.
Well, excuse me, yeah?
And so they're finding every fault they can to have the king make some changes, to have him run out or killed, and all the Jewish people with him.
It could very well be, though, early on, that they're just trying to get favor with Haman. Haman's now number 2 in the land, in one of the biggest nations in the history of man. I guess the only next one would be Rome, compared to them at the time. And so here's the number 2 guy walking around, and if you're in his inner circle, you're wanting to get favor. You're wanting to be promoted or whatever, because this guy does have power of life and death. And so, so there's a young woman named Hadassah. We always refer to her as Esther. In fact, we had a foster daughter whose name was Hadassah Nicole. And it was interesting to see that name. But anyway, Esther ultimately wins the favor of King Xerxes, and she's chosen to be queen. Again, let's go back a couple weeks, talking about standing firm. Why are they replacing the queen?
Oh, because Vashti was just very disobedient to the king, and he couldn't have that happening with all the other disobedient women it will.
Well, yeah, basically, she said, you are not going to parade me in front of all your drunk friends, which is what he said he was going to do. He said, I want to show them how beautiful you are. And of course, as we've said, it's been a big debate in theology over the years of whether he was going to parade her undressed or whatever. But regardless, she said, you're not going to treat me this way. You're not going to put me in front of your friends. So Haman says, let's find a new queen for you. And so they gather in all the good-looking young women in the land. They bring them in, and for a year, they remember we said they give them spa treatments, oil baths, treat their hair, give them makeup, all this stuff. And then again, the sexist thing, Terry, to go what you said. And then he chooses to sleep with every one of them until he finds the one he wants as a wife. So that kind of shows you his lack of thought process. But he sees her, and it doesn't say she did that, but he sees her and he says she's the one. And he marries her, makes her the queen. But the thing is, no one knows she's a Jewess. No one knows she is one of the descendants of those exiled from Israel. And she's keeping it secret. We read that last week. She's not saying who she is. Why?
She might be a little afraid.
But who told her not to say anything?
Mordecai said
Mordecai says, don't tell them who you are, what your background is. And I think that's the hand of God, because we know what's about to happen. We see the hand of God through this whole thing. We see the hand of God as she's chosen. And God's doing these things in advance for what's going to come later. So if we get nothing else from this series on Esther, we get the fact that God could be working in your life years before to get you to a point later on. He knows what he's doing. Part of when we were talking to Dr. Allison said, I want you to write down the head traumas you got and tell him. Well, I don't like to tell it because I kind of had a weird career. And to somebody I don't know, it might be a little unbelievable how many places I was and how I got hurt a few times. It's that way, but I think God was working in my life to bring us to this point and keeping me safe in those places I shouldn't have been. So anyway, it says Haman has a seat higher. When they refer to having a seat higher than any other noble, what is that referring to? No.
The height of the chair.
The higher the chair, yeah. Either at the table, he's probably sitting up with the king at the table, and everyone else sits down below. Or maybe he has in the council of nobles, his chair is right next to the king. It doesn't necessarily have to be actually physically higher. It just means in a better spot. And I've told you in the military all those years, we planned to the day who got to sit where based on their date of rank. So you start with what is their rank, and then you go through and figure out where everybody's date of rank fell. And if all else fails, then you put it by who was West Point graduate and who was not. And that made it. And so see, when you're in that kind of hierarchy of people with a lot of power, those things get important to those people. And let me tell you, if I was wrong, I heard about it. They complain. So here we are. He's higher than all the other nobles. Esther 3:1 says, and after these events, King Ahasuerus, or Xerxes, promoted, I'm going to be saying Xerxes, it's easier, promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and established his authority over all of the princes who were with him. So now he's not only calling him a high noble, he's a prince now of the kingdom. And so Mordecai, Esther's cousin and adopted father, is going about his business. Haman's telling everybody they have to bow, and now here's somebody who's not going to. And this shows the ridiculousness of Haman. He doesn't want to kill Mordecai. He wants to kill the entire Jewish race. That just shows how egotistical, how conniving, and I'd say unsure of his own self, or lack of self-confidence, that one person is going to destroy his whole outlook on life. So, what's the motivating issue here? Is it just pride? Maybe. Is it racism? Maybe. There's a lot of things it could be. So if someone would read the 11 verses for me. Okay, Josh, thank you.
Esther 3:1-11. After these things, King Xerxes promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes who were with him. And all the king's servants who were within the king's gate bowed and paid homage to Haman, for so the king had commanded concerning him. But Mordecai would not bow or pay homage. And the king's servants who were with the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's command?" Now it happened when they spoke to him daily, and he would not listen to them, that they told it to Haman, to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, for Mordecai had told them that he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay him homage, Haman was filled with wrath. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him of the people of Mordecai. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of King Xerxes and the people of Mordecai. In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of the king, they cast pur, that is the lot, before Haman to determine the day and the month until it fell on the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Then Haman said to the king, "There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from all other peoples, and they do not keep the king's laws. Therefore it is not fitting for the king to let them remain. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do the work, to bring it unto the king's treasuries." So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, "The money and the people are given to you to do with them as seems good to you."
Okay. So, again, right now, this is the largest country, largest power in the world at that time, the Persian Empire. And if you study history, we learn a lot of history about the Persian Empire when you're going to school. If you went to real schools like we have down south. I don't know about y'all up here, but anyway. Now, you study about the Persian Empire, and because it has such an influence in writing, in arithmetic, in so many sciences, they were so far advanced over other cultures and peoples. And again, the army was very powerful. You'll remember what King Xerxes looked like because he had the cool little beard that came down in ringlets or whatever. So, what is Haman's position in this powerful nation?
Second to the king.
Second to the king. Deputy kingman or something. Most powerful official in the kingdom, it said. And the first thing he does is has them all bow to him. That's the very first thing he's thinking of when he talks about being this leader. Not about how can I be a good leader, not how can I advance the king's agenda. Wow, look at me. Everybody needs to bow to me. So, Exodus 20, verses 3 through 5 says, "Thou shalt have no other God before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You will not bow down to them, you will not serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the sins of the father upon the children unto the third and fourth generations of them that hate me." Now, God is not putting the sin of the father, per se, on the child. What is he putting on them? This kind of verses get misunderstood when we talk about visiting sins on children. And it's important that we understand this. What is happening that is on those children, Robert? Or were you just standing up?
Well, I was going to say, when we talk about the sins of the father being bestowed upon the sons, usually it's like with like smoking or alcoholism. When you have seen the adult in your life that you look up to drink from a young age and drink all the time, you think that's normal. Therefore, it takes that much more of a step for you to be like, oh, that's not normal. I shouldn't live that way. And same thing with smoking. Like, you don't necessarily. There's a reason most kids of smoking parents smoke, because they've just been around it their entire lives, so they smoke at a young age. But even if they don't smoke, they still have a certain amount of health concerns from being around smoke for the first 18 years of their life. And I think that's usually what the Bible is referring to, is there is a certain amount of it being true of the sins of the Father going to the Son, but it's not the actual act of the sin, as in Jesus died for all sins. That sin is not being passed. But because of those sins, you're going to live a certain way probably.
Right. We call those generational sins
Yeah.
because they tend to be in a family generation after generation. As like you say, smoking is a good example. My grandfather smoked, and I broke him of the habit because I would stay with him all summer, and I kept stealing all the cigars and breaking them. He gave up on that, but he started chewing because I couldn't get that plug of tobacco out of his back pocket as easy. I tried. So my brother, as he's coming along, he wanted nothing more than to chew tobacco like my grandfather. And Granddad would always say, no, you're too young. So we raised tobacco in the family, and we were out there cutting tobacco, and he picked up a big old green leaf of tobacco off the ground. So one, it's not dry yet, two, it had not been washed yet, which they do in the factories, which means it had insecticide on it. And my cousin and I, we told him once because we're kind of mean that way. We warned him once though, because we had to be able to tell Grandmommy that we told him not to do it. But we just told him once. And he stuck that in his mouth. And you've always heard the saying about somebody turning green. He literally turned green. I've never seen anything like it. It's every bit of color left him, and then everything that was in him left him. And we had to carry him home.
Sick as a dog.
Oh, man. A generational sin. He's watching my grandfather do it, so he wants to do it. We see that in believing the children. Generational sins. Abused children statistically will abuse their own children. That's why we try to break these habits so early in their lives, because otherwise it's just going to continue to happen over and over again. So why then is Mordecai unwilling to bow? I got an issue here, though. I mean, we heard Derek. No, I'm not disagreeing with you. We heard Derek. Derek said, render unto Caesar what's Caesar's. Right? That was talking about the tax money. So how do you render unto Caesar but you won't bow to the king? Bob?
I think
And then
the
Josh?
biggest situation here is between the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire is Caesar was not a god in the later years of the Roman Empire.
Yes.
100%, Xerxes is literally known as a god king. Like, when you became king in a lot of the Middle Eastern cultures, you were a god, and there was nothing that could do, you made the sun rise. So I think that the render unto Caesar comment does not apply, but also not a Jewish ideal. So, there's that as well. But I think that there is a certain amount. If, the president got up and said, I'm your God now, that's no longer rendering unto Caesar what Caesar's.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's
There's
that
a
part. to it.
Perception difference
A
in who he
perception
is.
difference that you can't apply Derek's sermon to Mordecai.
He's trying to make you think. When he says render unto Caesar, he's actually talking about pay your taxes,
Yeah.
which is a very different thing. Josh?
I was going to say there's a difference in showing respect and worshiping too. I mean, you can respect your officials without worshiping them.
Yeah, in the military we always said you don't salute the person, you're saluting their rank of what that stands for. And sometimes you give that honor to the person because they deserve it. But there's a lot of people who don't deserve it. And so we always would tell our juniors, remember you're saluting what that stands for. And so, can you bow to a king if you're in an Asian country and they bow? Again, it depends on the circumstance and the reason. Yes.
Well, I think the other thing that comes here is that Mordecai would have imposed this on his family, this, while you may do certain things of yourself, you don't have the right to impose the punishment on somebody else.
Isn't it interesting, though, that there's nothing that says Xerxes was demanding everyone bow to him. It was a lower official. And I'm kind of shocked, and I assume this is where he's insulated. I'm kind of shocked that he didn't, he clearly doesn't know Haman's doing this. he doesn't hear that stuff. So,
Yeah, he does. It says, "For so the king had commanded concerning him."
oh, okay, all right, I missed that. Yeah,
I missed it too, but I saw it.
okay. So the king commanded that they bow to him. Okay, but that still leaves the question why. If it's not something you're requiring, maybe he did require, and the Bible just doesn't reflect it. But why would you give that honor to an underling and not yourself? I don't know. Anyway. And we talked about this already. They told on him. They specifically tell that he's a Jew, which seems to beg what, or infer racism, right? Because he makes a big deal about it. These people have their own laws, and they're not respecting your laws. That's his pitch point, which says basically is you can expect an uprising if they continue to grow. So Haman learns of it. He decides it's not enough. I was looking at the verse here. He decides it's not enough to just punish Mordecai. He's going to destroy their nation, and he's going to pay a lot of money for the people that will carry this out. Now, I had to read that several times to kind of get the gist because it's a little bit confusing. It's going to go into your treasury. Basically, what he's saying is we're going to pay the local officials that carry out this order because the Jews were scattered among the Persian regions, whatever you call it, countries. And he's basically telling the king, we're going to get our money back. It's tax money. We'll get it back from them. So, let's just pay them. They'll do it. It's your money. Will come back into the treasury. So he's planning to just basically steal it back from them through taxes. Yes, Mike?
I was just noticing, prior to this, Haman, there you go, that the soldiers, it took them a few times before they went to Haman and said, this guy's not doing what you asked him to do. Then, further down, maybe I'll wait, because I'm to the point where I read Haman's response to that before he went to the king, and how long it took him to do that.
Yeah, well, it takes him a year to carry out the sentence, not a year to tell the king.
And he's throwing lots to see if it's, should I do this?
Yeah. Purim, which were basically, as I remember from a long time ago in college, Purim were kind of basically dice. They were stones. So he's going to destroy all the Jews. Now, so let's look at some of the character qualities of Mordecai in this passage. First, Haman. Let's look at Haman first. Tell me the character qualities, the short descriptions you would give Haman. Pompous? A bully? Good words. Massive ego. I mean, he liked himself a lot. Josh?
I mean, it's it going through my own mind, and I know I'm way out left field there. You can almost see Haman and like somebody else that did not care for the Jews years and years later. You can almost trust them.
Isn't it interesting? When you read a book, because I prefer to read than watch a movie, but when you read a book, you get a mental image of who the person is, right? And then you start a movie that's based on the book, and they're just all wrong. And it's not nearly... So here's my image. I see Haman as about this tall and walking like this through town, because that's the kind of ego that this little guy has. So as opposed to that, what's Mordecai look like? Not physically. What does Mordecai look like characteristically? Kenny, you're being awful quiet. All right. How?
I would say that Mordecai is one of these people that's, how would Yogi Bear put this? Smarter than the average bear. He knew, when you read through this, he knew that he could not be pulled into the courtyard if he has in sackcloth. And so he dresses in sackcloth. He knew more about their laws, I think, than most of them did.
Bob, or Ben, whoever's that hand that was.
Well, I also don't see anywhere where he's going around purposely causing problems. He's not yelling at other people to stop doing it. He just says, this is my decision. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to cause problems, but I'm also not going to hide that I'm not going to follow along with it.
Yeah, you kind of get that picture that he's standing there, if he just happens to be by the gate, by, downtown shopping, and Haman walks by, he just doesn't do anything. Where everyone else hits the ground. But like Ben says, there is no evidence that he's trying to stir up an uprising. He's not telling anyone else to. In fact, he doesn't tell Esther not to give him whatever attention or whatever is required in the cat. He just says for himself. And that's the big lesson of this. Your integrity is not based on what everybody around you thinks. Your integrity is based on what you believe. You look at what God said, and you have to implement that. And it doesn't matter what the people around you are doing. It doesn't matter if your coworkers using foul language. You stick to what you know is right. It doesn't matter if somebody cuts you off. Don't be the one that just does the road rage thing. You just let it slide off. You get mad for a minute because I can't say don't do that because I do. But you let it slide. Because yours is not to be that person that winds up on YouTube. If it is, it's for good reason. It's not bad. So he's got integrity. He's got some wisdom here. Compassion. But he stays consistently loyal to God. And that's what we have to do. Consistently loyal to God. Okay, so if you don't learn at some point to yield to Jesus when he asks us to, we should feel pretty ashamed. Paul says, my determination, and we're switching gears here, we're talking more about how we react into Jesus' presence. Paul says, my determination is to give my utmost for his highest. Like the story I told you, that if the guy were ever find and call me that saved my life the one time, I'd go to him because I owe him a debt that he never asked me to pay. He doesn't have to ask me to pay it. I'm going to pay it anyway if I have the opportunity. It's that God has done everything for us. Jesus has given us everything. He gave his life. He went through torture for us. Why can't we bow before him? Why can't we give him some of that back? So it's not a debate. It's not reasoning. It's not surrendering your will. It's just paying what is owed. Now, he doesn't consider it payment. We do this because. We treat our loved ones a certain way because. Just because. And so it's talking about the kids we do, with our foster kids. I picked up Hadassah Nicole from the NICU in Grady Hospital. She had never seen her mother. She had never been held by her mother. They didn't even let the mother touch her. They took her straight out. And they didn't let the mother see her before. And when we got her, she was so horribly drug addicted that it took us 6 months to get her clean. And sleeping and stuff like that. But when she did get visits, she would get so fussy when it was time for a visit and after the visit. Why? She still loved her mother. That deep down natural, she knew who her mother was almost instinctively. Of course, remember, for 9 months we hear our mothers and we feel our mother's presence. And she wanted that. And that's, so that natural instinct to serve someone that gives you so much. Jesus gave us so much that we should have a natural instinct to serve and to demonstrate that to other people so that they can learn what that looks like.
The inspiration you have up there for the story here is, for me.
I wonder what I had up
No, you
there.
didn't have anything, just inspiration.
Okay.
Was Mordecai took off his own clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and he wailed, it said. And from how the story goes, I remember, it turned out for good for him, just like Joseph. What Haman meant evil for him, God meant for good.
Yep.
So he was humbled by doing all this, in my opinion. And, he sat outside the king's gate, and, then Esther's, whatever, went and told her what was going on. She sent back, clothes for him to put on instead of the sackcloth and ashes. And it just turned out what the story did. And I think because of how he presented himself.
Yeah. Can God turn his story to his advantage?
Oh,
Absolutely. Don't presume the writing is after the fact. Okay, I'm following you. Hang on a second. Don't presume God is locked into a reaction or an action because of where we're at in that moment. God can take anything and turn it around to good. Anything. Somebody mentioned Sunday about, was it Dahmer that supposedly got converted in? I don't know if that's true or not. I've heard that it is. I've heard supposedly which preacher up in Milwaukee or whatever studied with him and back. Okay, if it is, cool. If it's not, though, that story has been used to inspire people to do something better with their lives. So anyway, we need to consider the cost in saying, I'm going to be a child of God, I'm a Christian. Our obedience needs to mean something. It has to mean something. So we have to shut out every other consideration if it's going to be more than God. I'll give you a preview. Sunday sermon, I'm going to it almost tags along with what he said, but Sunday sermon is, when we sign a contract with the devil, what are we doing? What are we selling to the devil to get that? And sometimes it's a little or nothing people sell themselves to the devil for. And so we need to say, I'm sold to Christ. I'm sold on Christ. I'm sold to Christ. I'm his. I'm determined to be absolutely and entirely his child. And we still all make mistakes. That's not the point. The point is my focus, my goal, my actions lead me towards the right things, not away from them. So he brings us to a place that he just says, now give me your utmost because I gave you mine. And that's where the great divide becomes, because when you stand up for what's right, why do we take a chance on losing?
Maybe a friend,
Maybe friends.
maybe family members.
There's people here I know have talked about having lost family members because they decided to change their life. Definitely, most of us have lost friends. Mike?
Let's see, what happens if some people will get baptized or born again, and they look around at their family and say, well, they know what they're doing and they're not going to do, they don't get,
That's okay. No. You know what? Jesus said, if you're not willing to forsake your mother and father, you're not worthy to follow me. And basically what he's saying, if you're not willing to do whatever it takes to be my child, then you're not worthy of this. And that takes practice. It really does. Yeah. I never take for granted that I grew up in a very strong Christian home because it made it very easy for me. And even growing up, Franklin, Kentucky, as I've said before, you're either Southern Baptist or you're Church of Christ. There is no in between. You're one of those two, which means the majority of the teachers, the majority of the students were from very religious households. And so we didn't have a lot of people pulling us in the wrong direction. We had more people pulling us in the right direction. I don't take that for granted because not everybody grew up that way. Not everybody grew up in that setting. So if a crisis has come to you on any line, just surrender to him and take what comes. Don't worry about it. So what does it mean to do your utmost? What does the word utmost mean?
Best,
Your best?
as much as you can.
There you go. That's even better. Go as much as you can go. 100% full out. Until you got nothing left. We're looking to glorify Him. We're looking to praise Him in all of our things. So what are some of the things that can cause you to surrender to God? To learn to bow to Him? What are some of those things that happen in life that kind of can trigger that for us?
Tragedies.
Hmm?
Tragedies.
Tragedies? Absolutely. When all of a sudden we come to that realization that I can't handle this on my own, I need something more. I need something more. And again, that's why I always say the church family is so important. One, church family fills in some of those gaps here. We know God fills them in elsewhere, Mike.
So, first the Church of Christ on near the bypass, the east side, they're not there anymore, but this one guy had their kids murdered at home, and then they decided they fell away.
And that happens sometimes. It is terrible when someone loses a child because people tend to divorce in more cases than not. You don't usually hear about people drawing closer. You hear about them being separated by that pain and tragedy, and it's sad. But it happens. People do fall away. But those things should draw us closer. And again, when something drags you away, and as we know, we all go through stages of grief. We all have to go through and reconcile our brains to what happened. But hopefully your faith is enough to draw you back in closer to God and not pull you away from Him. So those tragedies expose our vulnerability. And that hurts. We just hate that. And that's when we turn to God to fill that void for us. We kind of hit on that. So he went after the whole Jewish nation. Why do people of the world go after Christians?
Satan's doing his job.
Yeah. But Satan's doing his job because then we get too embarrassed to do the right thing. We feel like we're losing too much if we do it. And I don't want to get into a discussion about this Charlie Kirk thing, but I do want to say, look at the disparity of someone willing to kill because they hate somebody so much. That's just counterintuitive. They're such a hateful person, I'm going to kill them just so they'll shut up. What is the disparity in your thinking there? When you're thinking, it's okay for me to murder because they say things I don't like. That's crazy. It's just insane. Now, but we're not going to discuss that was Sunday.
I think about this because the thing that I find the most ludicrous is somebody that says, I hate abortion, so I'll bomb an abortion clinic.
Exactly. I always used to say that, why did I not ever join Right to Life as a group? Because of the nutsos in it, in the one faction that were killing people. All life is precious means all life is precious. Josh?
And I just thought too, why Christians are asked, they won't fight back. I think sometimes often that is because if they fight back, then they're evil. So they can't fight back, which...
Yeah. Some of the things that are pressuring us to give in these days are, I was reading a psychology book on this just recently, but it's talked about shifting cultural norms cause us to struggle with people around us. Because all of a sudden our viewpoint is the one that's not in favor right now. The influence of secularism, which is saying, you can take that two ways. I'm okay, you're okay, everybody's going to get there in the end, or the idea that we all have a right to do nothing You know, so don't tell me about your faith or don't demonstrate your faith because I'm uncomfortable with you. Or the fact that, here's one of them, facts of things like the Crusades, where we went through and killed tens of thousands to prove our point. It's not how that works. All right, we're going to stop there. Just be prepared to stand up for your beliefs in spite of everyone else.